Sometimes a smell takes you back faster than a photograph ever could. Just this morning, I was baking one of my old apple pies, the kind with cinnamon, brown sugar, and that flaky lard crust my grandma used to make. And I tell you what, when I pulled that pie out of the oven, well, I just stood there for a moment, eyes closed. That smell, it hit me like a freight train. Took me straight back to the fall of 1961. I was 13 then, just a skinny girl with skinned up knees and dreams too big for our town. I remember the way the wind felt that day, warm, dry, with a little bite of October. Daddy had the radio on in the shed, some Hank Williams tune drifting through the screen door. Mama was peeling potatoes at the table, not saying a word. She never did say much by then. And I was still foolish enough to believe love could fix anything. Now, I ain't told this story to many people. Not all of it. It's not that I'm ashamed, no ma'am. It's just some memories get buried deep for a reason. You get on with life. You raise kids, pay bills, bury folks. And before you know it, you forget how much one moment, one choice, can ripple out and change the shape of everything that comes after. But that smell this morning, that pie, it brought it all back like it was yesterday. The boy, the fight, the suitcase on the porch, and the long walk that followed. I hadn't even finished school, didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. No plan, no place to go. Just 15 years old with a pair of worn-out shoes and a heart full of shame and stubborn hope. You see, there's a story I've kept to myself for many years. One I tucked away in the quiet corners of my heart, where old wounds and old strength sleep side by side. But lately, I've been thinking maybe it's time I shared it. Not for pity, not for praise, but for that one girl out there who thinks her story's already been written. The one who thinks her mistakes define her. Honey, they don't. Not even close. And if my voice can reach her, even just her, then maybe all the hurt had a purpose after all. I want to take y'all back with me now. Back to a time when gas was 30 cents a gallon, phones had cords, and nobody locked their doors. Back to a dusty little Texas town where my name was Joe Ray and my world was smaller than a dinner plate until it wasn't. Until it cracked wide open. I didn't know it then, but the night my daddy threw me out, that was the night my life truly began. I didn't know I was walking straight into hunger and cold and loneliness, but also into grit, into grace. Into the kind of strength you don't find until you're standing all alone with nothing left but your own 2 hands. So, if you're sitting there with your phone or your laptop, listening to an old woman talk about apple pies and heartbreak, stay with me. 'Cause I've got a story to tell, and it ain't always pretty, but it's real, and sometimes real is exactly what we need. And before we get started, let me ask you this. Just between you and me. What would you do if the only home you ever knew turned its back on you at 15? Would you fall apart? Or would you find a way to rise with nothing but a broken heart and a pair of calloused hands? Go ahead. Be honest. I'll be here listening. Grandma Joe's always listening. I reckon the place I come from don't even show up on most maps. El Campo, Texas, name means the field and Lord. Wasn't that the truth? Flat land as far as the eye could see. Rows and rows of cotton that danced when the wind blew just right. In summer, the heat would sit on your shoulders like a wet blanket, and in winter, the mornings came with a white frost so quiet you didn't want to speak. Back then, life moved slower. Sundays meant church. Even if you were sick, Mom'd say, the Lord can heal you just as easy from the pew. We had potlucks with too much macaroni and not enough fried chicken. Folks bring lawn chairs and sit under the trees while the preacher talked too long, and the kids snuck lemonade when no one was looking. That was just the rhythm of it all. That was home. I was a skinny little thing, all elbows and sunburnt cheeks, hair wild as a tumbleweed. I spent most of my time barefoot, running around the yard with my brothers, hollering at each other over who got the last biscuit. I remember Mama's hands always smelling like ivory soap and onions. Daddy smelled like sweat, tobacco, and sometimes oil from the tractors he fixed. He didn't say much, but when he did, it meant something. I always listened, even when I didn't want to. He was the kind of man who'd nod instead of hug. And Mama, she was tender when she had the strength. But even as a child, I could tell the weight of life pressed down on her like laundry never quite dry. I didn't know we were poor until I left. To me, that one pair of shoes a year was just how it was. We made do with what we had. Christmas meant peppermint sticks and hand-sewn dolls. My favorite one had a button missing for an eye, but I swore she could see right through me. I'd whisper secrets to her at night, lying in bed with the crickets singing through the screen door. I thought the world was big and bright and mostly good. I thought all people were honest, and that one day, when I was grown, I'd live in a house with blue shutters, bake pies on Thursdays, and never go to bed angry. I believed kindness could fix anything. I believed if you loved someone, they would always stay. I didn't understand then what grown-ups kept locked inside. The silent grudges, the disappointments no one dared say out loud. I was just a girl with scraped knees and a full heart. I remember watching the high school girls with their ponytails and saddle shoes and thinking, one day I'll be like them. I'll have my own lipstick and my own pocketbook and I'll go into town whenever I please. But those dreams, they were soft. They hadn't yet been tested. Looking back now, I think I always had this little spark in me. A restlessness. A knowing. Even as a child, I'd sit out on the porch swing and wonder what was beyond the fields. I didn't know about cities or stock markets or uniforms or factories, none of that. But I knew I wasn't meant to just sit still. I used to daydream about owning a little shop with my name on the window. I'd imagine women coming in and saying, "Now that's a Joe original." Silly, maybe, but that dream got me through more cold nights than I can count. I guess what I'm trying to say is, before life broke me down, it gave me sweetness. There was sunlight in those days, even if it came with dust. There was love, even if it wasn't always spoken. And there were dreams. Soft, warm, foolish dreams. I held M close like a penny in my pocket. And I believed, with all my heart, that people who loved you would always come back. That was my truth back then, before the storm. I still remember the first time I saw him. It was a Wednesday. Funny the things your mind keeps hold of. I can't recall what I wore last week, but I remember that Wednesday like it's still playing on a reel somewhere behind my eyes. The air was thick with heat, sun high and sharp like it had teeth, and I was walking home from the library, carrying a book too grown up for me but pretending otherwise. My shoes were full of dust, and I had sweat on my upper lip. That's when I saw him leaning against the fence by the old hardware store, tuning his guitar, humming low. He wasn't from around El Campo. You could tell right off. He had this calm way about him, like the world didn't shake him none. And his eyes, Lord have mercy, they were soft, not weak, soft, like he saw more than he let on. He nodded at me as I passed, polite. I nodded back, pretending not to notice the way my stomach fluttered like a jar of fireflies tipped over. I didn't know why my heart picked up pace just then. I didn't have words for it, but something shifted in me, like a new chapter quietly turned itself, right there in the middle of a Texas summer. His name was Isaiah. He was 17. Spoke with that slow kind of confidence, like he meant every word and didn't mind waiting for the right one. Said he was helping his uncle for the summer, fixing up old radios and anything else folks brought round. First time we talked, it was over a broken watch my daddy gave up on. Isaiah fixed it in 5 minutes and handed it back with a smile. Sometimes things ain't broke, he said. They just need a gentler hand. I didn't even blink. I just stared. Right then, I was gone. He wasn't like the boys at school, all elbows and loud mouths. He listened, and he looked at me like I was someone. Not just a girl with dust on her hem and freckles across her nose. With him, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, heard, and that feeling, well, it's a kind of magic nobody warns you about. We'd meet in quiet places, the back of the churchyard, near the creek, the edge of the cotton fields when the moon was high. We never did nothing wrong. We just talked. Sat close. Sometimes he'd play guitar and sing real soft, songs I'd never heard on the radio. I told him things I'd never told a soul, that I wanted to leave, that I didn't feel at home in my own house, that I dreamed of making things with my hands, putting my name on something that mattered. Isaiah never laughed, never told me to dream smaller. He'd just nod and say, I believe you will, Joe. You've got something in you. But the world we lived in, it didn't smile kindly on us. Not in 1963, not in Texas. A white girl and a black boy sitting close under a cottonwood tree. Well, it didn't take long for word to spread. And once it reached Daddy's ears, the storm came fast. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want explanations. There was shouting, slamming doors, Mama crying behind her hands. And by morning, my clothes were packed in a brown suitcase, sitting by the porch swaying like somebody else's trash. 15 years old, no money, no home, just a heart torn open by the first real thing I'd ever known. I didn't get to say goodbye, not properly. But sometimes, when I hear an old blues tune on the radio, or smell the honeysuckle that grew wild behind the church, I think of him. The boy with the quiet eyes, the one who saw me before I knew who I was. And I whisper, thank you, Isaiah. He didn't stay, but he showed me what it felt like to matter. That first night, I didn't cry, not even once. My hands were shaking, sure, and my throat burned like I'd swallowed hot coals, but the tears, they stayed put, like even they were too scared to come out. I walked until my feet blistered, past the edge of town, past the blinking gas station and the railroad tracks, until I came to that old church no one went anymore. The back shed was unmarked, probably hadn't been in use since the 50s, and that's where I laid down, right on a pile of cardboard and old hymnals, pulling my coat tight like it could keep out the cold and the ache and the truth. 15 years old, no roof, no supper, no voice left to pray with. You think it's the hunger that hurts first, but no, it's the silence. That still, cruel kind that wraps around your ribs and tells you, you ain't worth savon. That next morning, I woke to birdsong and a crick in my neck, and I'll tell you, the world looked different from the ground. Bigger, meaner. I brushed myself off like I had somewhere to be, but truth is, I didn't. I didn't have a soul in that town anymore. I remember trying to buy a biscuit at Miller's Diner with a crumpled dollar and a smile. The lady behind the counter, Miss Ruby, she looked at me hard, like she could see the church dust on my skirt and the worry in my eyes. She didn't say much, but she handed me a plate, one biscuit, 2 slices of bacon. On the house, she said, you look like someone who won't forget a kindness. She was right. I never did. That was my first warm meal in 3 days. I tried to find work. Went door to door, asking folks if they needed help cleaning or sweeping or anything at all. Most just shut the door soft, like they were sorry, but not sorry enough. One man, he offered something I won't repeat. That was the first time I said no and meant it like a brick wall. I walked away with my stomach hollering and my pride holding me up. Funny how sometimes dignity is the only thing you've got, and even that feels too heavy to carry. At night, I go back to that shed. I made myself a little corner with some torn up curtains and a milk crate for a table. I had a book from the library, Jane Eyre, and I'd read it slow by flashlight, whispering the words like they were spells. That story saved me in a way, made me feel less alone, like someone, even on a page, understood what it felt like to be unwanted. But even stories couldn't quiet the fear that crept in when the wind picked up. When the roof creaked and footsteps came too close, I'd hold my breath, clench my fists, think about Mama. I wondered if she missed me, if she knew I wasn't sleeping in no bed. I wondered if Daddy felt proud of kicking his daughter out 'cause she loved someone who didn't match his picture of the world. And then I'd feel ashamed for still wanting her to come find me, for hoping someone, anyone, might come looking. During the days, I started cleaning up behind Miller's diner, just for scraps. Miss Ruby never asked questions, but she'd nod when she saw me scrubbing the back step like it mattered. One day, she left a pair of socks on the crate out back. Brand new. I cried then. Quiet, small tears. The kind that slipped down without a skin. Back then, I wasn't thinking about the future. I wasn't planning no business or dreaming about uniforms or factories. I was just trying to stay warm, to stay kind, to stay myself, whatever was left of that girl with the freckles and two big dreams. I'd lie awake wondering if I'd always live like that between scrubs and silence. But somewhere deep down, under the fear and the dirt and the empty, I felt a flicker. Not hope, not yet, but grit. A voice inside me whispering, "You ain't done yet, Joe. You just got started." I remember the way the light hit the floor that day, thin like thread pulled too tight. It was late afternoon, dusty gold pouring through the cracks of that back room at Miller's, where I kept my things behind the mop sink. I'd been working 12 hours straight, cleaning grease-off pans and floors, hands raw and knees itching. And when I sat down, finally, just to breathe, just to rest, I saw it, the singer, covered in cloth, tucked in the corner like somebody had forgotten it, or maybe left it on purpose. I don't know what made me walk over. I hadn't sewn a thing since home EC class, and even then I was clumsy. But I pulled that cloth back, touched the cool metal, and something in me clicked, like a bell ringing far off. Miss Ruby came in right then. I thought she'd scold me for touching it, but she just looked at me and said, "You wanna learn?" I nodded before I could think. "Good," she said. "It's yours if you can fix her up." She ain't been used in years. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't go back to the shed. I stayed right there, in the dim back room with a rusted chair and a little lamp, and I started cleaning her up, piece by piece. My fingers worked like they remembered something my mind had forgotten. I stitched a line. It was crooked. Then another, better, and I kept going. That sound, the hum of the machine, it was the first music I'd heard in a long time that didn't make me sad. For a while, things got not easier, but steady. I started making aprons, little pillowcases, mending napkins for the diner. Miss Ruby slipped me a few dollars here and there. Folks started to skin. "Can that girl fix a hem? You think she could sew a patch?" I thought maybe, just maybe, this was how I'd claw my way up. I thought maybe I'd found something that would carry me. But the world doesn't like a girl who rises too fast. One night, 2 men came and drunk. Locals, sat at the back booth, Logan too loud, eyes too sharp. I didn't like the way they looked at me, and neither did Ruby. She told me to go out back and wait. I took the singer with me. I'd gotten used to carrying her like a baby. But they followed, cornered me by the alley gate. I won't say what was said. I won't give it breath. All I'll say is I ran. Hard. I dropped the machine. She hit the pavement with a sound I still hear in my sleep. Metal on concrete. A snap like a bone breaking. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs buckled. I remember lying behind the dumpsters, dirt in my mouth, hands bleeding from the fall. And time, it stopped. I swear to you it did. The air got still. The world went quiet. Just the thump of my heart and the memory of Isaiah's voice. You've got something in you. And right there, between rage and terror, I felt it. Not the end, but the beginning. I got up slow, picked up the pieces of that broken machine, carried them back like a mourner. I sat on the floor all night, fixing what I could with wire and glue. When the sun came up, she ran again. Limped a little, but ran. And so did I. That night taught me something I never forgot. The world will break you if it can, but you get to choose what to do with the pieces. I'd lost my safety, my belief that work alone would protect me. But I'd gained something else: fire. Cold, clear, steady fire. The kind that doesn't burn wild, but warms your bones and keeps you going. I wasn't just a girl anymore. I was a girl who survived. After that night, something in me went quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get from peace, no. This was a hollow sort of quiet. The kind that settles into your bones like winter, slow and deep, and makes even your breath feel too loud. I still woke up every morning, still tied my apron, still ran that needle through the fabric, but it was like watching someone else's hands doing it. My guide stepped out of my own skin and was floating just above the girl I used to be, watching her try to stitch herself back together. The alley, the fear, the broken singer, they took something from me I didn't even know I had: trust. Not just in people that had already been wearing thin, but in life itself. In the idea that if you were good and worked hard and kept your head down, maybe the world would let you be. Turns out, the world don't owe you kindness just 'cause your heart's clean. I stopped talking as much. Miss Ruby noticed, but she didn't push. She just handed me a thermos of coffee in the mornings and sat with me in the back room while I sewed, both of us pretending. It wasn't strange to sit for an hour without saying a word. That silence between us, it was the closest thing I had to comfort then. It wasn't a skin nothing. Wasn't expecting me to smile or be strong or tell it was all gonna be okay. It just let me be broken. And sometimes that's the only kindness you need. I remember walking home one night, well, to the shed, still, and the stars were out, bright and hard. Cold air, sharp enough to sting. I looked up and realized I hadn't prayed in weeks. Not 'cause I didn't believe anymore, but because I didn't know what to ask for. Safety? I'd lost that. Love? Didn't trust it. A future? Couldn't picture it. I was still alive, but living didn't feel like much. It felt like drifting, like one long breath you never quite let out. For the first time in my young life, I understood why people give up. I didn't want to, not really, but I understood. The weight of everything pressed down so quiet, so steady, you didn't even notice it was crushing you until one day you couldn't get out of bed. I remember sitting with my back against the wall, holding my knees and thinking, maybe this is just what life is. Maybe this is all it's ever gonna be. But there was one thing I couldn't stop doing sewing. Even when I felt nothing, I kept that machine running. Stitch by stitch, I pushed through the silence. I didn't think it meant anything, didn't think it would lead anywhere, but it was something to hold on to. Something that still obeyed me. When the world didn't make sense, the thread still followed the needle. The fabric still folded where I told it to. In a world that had slipped out of my hands, that little home was the only thing that still answered back. I wasn't full of fire like before. The fight had left me, or maybe just gone deeper. I wasn't angry. I wasn't crying. I was just empty. But sometimes, emptiness clears space. Space for something new. I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that the girl who used to believe in people, in good hearts and happy endings, she was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, harder, but steadier. I didn't feel brave, but I kept going. And that was enough. It happened on a Tuesday. Funny how the big things never come dressed in fireworks, just plain old days, wrapped in dust and ordinary light. I was sitting in the back of Miller's again, patching a waitress's apron that had more holes than fabric left, when Miss Ruby poked her head in and said, "Joe, there's a nurse from over at County Skin if you do uniforms." I blinked. "Uniforms?" I said, like I'd never heard the word before. Ruby just shrugged. She says her folks are tired of buying stiff, scratchy things from catalogs that don't fit right. I told her you got good hands. That one sentence, "you got good hands," it hit me right in the chest. After all that silence, all that cold drifting, it was like someone struck a match in the dark. Not a fire, not yet, but a spark. I set down the apron, wiped my hands on my skirt, and stepped out front to meet the woman. Her name was Marla. She was maybe in her 40s, wore glasses on a chain, and had that tired but kind look nurses get after too many years on their feet. She asked if I could make her a simple scrub top, softer than the ones from the supply company, with pockets big enough for tape and notes. I didn't know what I was saying yes to, but I said it anyway. "I'll try," I told her. She smiled. That's more than most do. That night, I stayed up drawing patterns on butcher paper I'd salvaged from the diner, ripping up old pillowcases to use as fabric. I worked slow, careful, like every stitch was holding together more than cotton, like it was trying to hold me together too. And when I finished, I held it up in the lamplight and thought, well, maybe it ain't perfect, but it's honest. Marla came back 2 days later, tried it on right there by the sink. I watched her eyes in the mirror. She smiled, said it felt like it was made for her skin, not just her job. "You ever thought of doing this for real?" she asked. I laughed, a strange sound. Hadn't heard it in weeks. "I ain't even got a sign," I told her. She looked at me square and said, "Then make one." So I did. Next day, I found an old plank behind the church and painted it with whatever I had, by Joe. That was it. Simple, honest. A name. My name. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I hung it up outside the shed like it was a real storefront, and I tell you, just seeing it there, swinging in the breeze like it had a right to be, it did something to me. Like I'd finally taken up space in the world. At first, there were just a few customers, mostly word of mouth. One nurse told another. A teacher from the school asked for a skirt hemmed. Then a woman from the diner wanted a Sunday dress. Every time someone came, I wrote their name down in a little notebook. Not for money. Half the time they paid in eggs or jam, but because each name meant I wasn't invisible anymore. It wasn't a business yet. Not really, but it was something. Something I made with my own 2 hands. Something that didn't ask me to be less. And as I sat there night after night, sewing by lamplight with music humming low on the radio, I started to feel it. That flicker I thought was gone for good. Hope. Not the big, shiny kind. Just the quiet sort, like warm bread or sunlight through lace curtains. The kind that says, "You're still here." And maybe, just maybe, there's more ahead. It was the rain that brought it on, I think. Not a storm, just a slow, steady drizzle, the kind that taps on tin roofs like a memory you can't quite shake. I was sitting inside the shed, the old singer humming under my hands, and the thread snapped mid-stitch. Just popped. Simple as that. I looked down at the frayed end and, for some reason, started crying. Not the loud kind, just a quiet stream down my cheeks while my fingers trembled on the fabric. And it hit me all at once. I'd been living like that thread, pulled too tight, stretched over too many years of silence and survival, trying to hold everything together just a little bit longer. But things don't hold forever, not unless you stop and fix what's inside. I don't know how long I sat there crying over nothing and everything. I just know that when I stood up, my knees felt heavier than they had in a while, but my chest felt lighter. Like I'd finally let myself grieve for all the things I never had time to. Isaiah, the life I didn't get, the girl I used to be, the mama who didn't say goodbye, the daddy who didn't believe love was big enough. I walked out into the rain. No shoes, no umbrella. Just me, the wet grass, and years of weight finally loosening their grip. And that's when I knew, truly knew, that I didn't have to carry it all anymore. I'd survived. I'd built something with my own two hands. I didn't know the past any more of my present. I could still be Joe, just Joe. Not the girl who was kicked out, not the one who hid behind a sewing machine. A woman now, a whole one, even if the scars still ached sometimes. I went back inside, dug into the old box under my cot, and pulled out the little music box Isaiah had given me. It hadn't worked in years. The lid was scratched, but I opened it anyway and watched the tiny ballerina try to spin. She didn't move. I didn't mind. I took the box out to the creek behind the church and sat with it in my lap. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I whispered thank you. Not at the box, not even just to him, but to everything. To the pain that shaped me. To the hunger that made me fierce. To the silence that taught me to listen. And then I let it go. Set it in the water, watched it drift until it caught on a branch and stayed there, half sunk. I didn't stay to see it rot. That wasn't the point. I'd done the leaving. I walked back to the shed, and for the first time since I was 15, I packed. Not because I was being thrown out, but because I was ready to go. Next morning, I told Miss Ruby. I'm heading to Austin, I said. I found a spot. A tiny room, but there's a window. And I hear they got hospitals there, big ones. She didn't cry, just nodded. Slipped me a folded veil. Start fresh, she said. You've earned that. And I had. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't trying to prove nothing. I wasn't mad. I wasn't even scared. I was just done carrying ghosts. I chose to live, not in spite of the past, but with it. Woven in, like a darker thread in a bright fabric. Still part of the pattern, but not the whole thing. That day, I didn't look back once. Sometimes I sit on my porch with a cup of tea chamomile with a bit of lemon, and I watch the shadows move across the yard. You'd be surprised how much a person can learn just from sitting still. These days, life is louder, faster, more crowded, but the truth, the important stuff still happens in the quiet. And in that quiet, I find myself looking back. Not in sadness, well, maybe a little, but mostly in wonder. At how far I came, at who I used to be, at how close I came to giving up, and how I didn't. You know, when I was 15 and standing on that porch with a suitcase and a broken heart, I thought that moment defined me, thought it stamped unwanted right across my soul. And for a long time, I let it. I stitched that story into everything, into my work, into how I spoke, into how I didn't let folks get close. But somewhere along the road, somewhere between that first handmade scrub top and the day Joe Tex opened its doors, I started writing a new story. One that said, you can begin again. You can be more than the worst thing that ever happened to you. I used to believe life was about what you lost. Now I know it's about what you build. Loss is just a place you pass through. What matters is what you carry out of it. Joe Tex didn't make me a millionaire right away. It started slow, backroom orders, long nights, more rejection than I care to remember. But I kept sewing, kept showing up, and the women who wore my uniforms, they kept coming back. Because I wasn't just making clothes. I was making things with care, with memory in the seams, with dignity stitched in every hem. One day, a young girl came into my office, about 17, nervous, sharp eyes, said she wanted to learn to sew, not just to make things, she told me, but to make a way. And Lord, if that didn't undo me, I gave her my old singer, the same one I dragged through the alley all those years ago. Told her, she's got fight in her, just like you. That was the day I realized legacy ain't what you leave behind. It's what you pass forward. You ask me what I've learned, and I'll tell you plain. You can't wait for the world to tell you you're worthy. You gotta decide that for yourself. You gotta stop waiting on the apology that'll never come, on the rescue that ain't riding in, on the past to change. At some point, child, you gotta say your own name onto your life. If you're sitting there listening, feeling like you're stuck, like you missed your chance or lost your spark, let me tell you something, the road ain't closed. It just got quiet. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting on you to take the next step. Maybe it's time you stop waiting for things to get easier. Maybe it's time you stop waiting on permission. Maybe, just maybe, it's time you stopped waiting. Period. I did, and it changed everything. These days, I sit in the sun a lot. Not 'cause I'm tired, though Lord knows these old bones don't move like they used to, but because I earned that sunlight. I earned these quiet mornings on my porch in Austin, with the breeze coming in soft through the lemon tree and the sound of my grandbaby's Logan somewhere in the yard. I don't rush nowhere anymore. I stir my tea slow. I let the wind mess up my hair. And sometimes I just sit, not to think, not to plan, just to be. You know, folks always ask me, Joe, how'd you do it? How do you go from nothing to building a business, a life, a name? And I usually smile and say with grit, and thread, and a whole lot of stubborn. But the truth is, I did it 'cause I had to. And somewhere deep down, even in my darkest nights, I believed that life had more for me than pain. I didn't know what or when or how, but I believed it. And maybe that's what saved me. This story I've told you, it ain't just about the past. It's about right now. About every young girl sitting on a bus bench with a torn bag and no place to go. About every grown woman carrying heartache from 30 years ago like it happened yesterday. About every man who thought he had to be hard to survive, and every child who waited on love that never came. We carry so much, don't we? Quiet hurts, forgotten dreams, things we don't say out loud even to ourselves. But here's what I learned. The past don't get to have the last word, not unless you hand it the pen. I ain't the same girl who once stared at the back of a diner with threadbare shoes and calloused hands, but I carry her with me. I carry all my past selves, the brave ones, the broken ones, the foolish ones. They made me who I am. They sit with me now in the sun like old friends who don't need to talk. Just be near. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear that guitar. Just faint. Just enough. Makes me wonder if Isaiah ever got where he was going. If he found peace. If he ever thought of me. I like to think he did. I like to think that somewhere he's sitting in the sun too, maybe with his own family, maybe with a cup of coffee, remembering a girl who listened too hard and loved too fast. And sometimes I wonder, if I turned a corner tomorrow, would I see him there older, slower, but still humming soft to himself? Would we recognize each other? I'll tell you what, some loves don't fade. They don't burn out. They just settle deep like roots. Quiet. Steady. Always there, whether you water them or not. Now, I've said a lot. Maybe too much. But if you've stayed with me this far, well, I reckon there's a reason for that. Maybe you're holding something in your own hands that feels too heavy. Maybe you've been waiting on a sign, or forgiving someone, or maybe forgiving yourself. So let me ask you, and take your time with the answer. Do you think real love is supposed to come back? Or do we just learn to carry it forward in a different shape? I still don't know. But I do know this. You're stronger than you feel right now. And it ain't too late to start again, even if you're starting slow. Even if all you've got is a needle, a name, and a heart that refuses to quit. You hear me? Now go on. Tell me what you believe. I'll be here. Grandma Joe's always here.